All right, welcome to this awesome sexpert interview. Today, my guest is Sheila Wray Gregoire, all the way from Toronto, Canada. I've known you for several years now. We've worked together on a few small projects, and you were our featured keynote speaker at our last live event last November for Get Your Marriage On thing.
Yes, before COVID, one of the last things I did before COVID hit. So maybe one day we'll be able to do that again. So
Great. And everyone that knows you quickly gravitates to your upbeat personality. You're also really smart and you know your stuff. And you have this remarkable ability to connect with other people, especially women. And you have a really fun story too. So if you could just take one moment and talk about how you started to love, honor, and vacuum for those that may not have heard about you.
Okay, well, when we got married, sex was the worst part of our marriage. Like, it was just awful. And Keith wanted it all the time, and it hurt, and it was just awkward, and I couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about. And over the next few years, I decided that I did not want to live like that. And so I went on this huge research project on how to make sex better and how to make marriage better. And so I started writing about marriage and sex, and it came out in my first book, To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, which was really more about marriage and parenting. Came out in 2003 in my first book, To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, When You Feel More Like a Maid Than a Wife and a Mother. And then in 2008, I started blogging. I called my blog that because that was my book, and I liked that. And I didn't get a lot of traffic until 2012. I started talking about sex. And all of a sudden, everybody descended. And that year, my book, The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex, came out. And I've just been talking about sex ever since. And so I've read everything on it. I've researched everything on it. And hey, it's the best research project anybody can ever do. So that's great.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. So today our topic is on orgasm, especially women reaching orgasm. Can you tell me about, is this a big deal? Is this worth talking about? How many women struggle to reach orgasm?
Yeah, well, let me give you a clue of something that I call the orgasm gap, which is really important to understand. So basically, around 95% of men almost always reach orgasm during intercourse or any sexual encounter. For women, that number is more like 48% in our survey that we just did of 20,000 women. And so that's an orgasm gap of roughly, what is that? Almost 47%, right? So that's a huge orgasm gap. So at any given sexual encounter, he's like twice as likely to reach orgasm as she is. And so we've got to fix that. So even if the women who are doing well, it's a problem, right? But then if you look at that, there's also around 11 to 12% of women never reach orgasm at all. Another 12% do rarely, like it occurs once in a blue moon. And then you have some who reach it, sometimes, but not that often. So what I'm trying to figure out is how can we get everybody else to join those women in the 48%? Because that's what we should be aiming for. We want to close that gap.
Gotcha. Very good. And does that gap affect marriages? Why do we care about that gap?
I think when we think about sex issues and when we think about the tension that people often have regarding sex and marriage, the most common fight or conflict that couples have is on how often you have sex, right? Like, how often are we going to have sex? And somebody invariably wants it more. It isn't always the guy. In about 24 to 26% of cases, it's the woman who wants it more. But someone always wants it more, and you tend to fight over how often we're going to have sex. And what we found in our research is that in cases where he does have the higher sex drive, we think the problem is frequency when usually it's not. Usually the problem is she just isn't looking forward to something, which does nothing for her. And so if we can address orgasm, if we can address pleasure, often the frequency stuff takes care of itself. And so I think that we're looking at the wrong thing. Frequency is not, it's not like a thermostat that you can just turn up in order to make everything better in your marriage. It's more like, a thermometer that measures what's really happening in the sex life.
Okay, great. And later on, we're going to talk more about what husbands can do to help with a lot of these things too. So I'm looking forward to getting to that. But first, I wanted to ask, what are some common myths that women have regarding sex that affect their ability to reach orgasm?
I think there's just a common thought, whether it's inside the church or religious communities or even in our culture in general, that men enjoy sex more than women do. And that sex is kind of something that a guy needs, whereas a woman doesn't really need it. And so they kind of have sex to fulfill his needs, and that's about it.
Isn't that kill passion and desire?
Yeah, but you know, another issue is just our definition of sex, which when we think about sex, if I were to ask you, did you have sex last night? Like that would be an extremely awkward and terrible question to ask. So I would never actually do that. But when you do hear that question, you're picturing something, right? Like you're picturing, did he, you know, put A into slot B? Like, like what we're picturing is intercourse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says, did you have sex? What they're asking is, did you have intercourse? And the thing about that is that in intercourse, a guy is almost always going to reach climax. That's how intercourse tends to end, is his climax. But with women, only around, of the women who can reach orgasm, only about a third of them can reach orgasm with intercourse alone. The rest need a lot of foreplay, or they never reach intercourse or never reach orgasm during intercourse. They only reach orgasm in other ways. And
Gotcha.
so when we think about, you know, myths about sex, I think one of the big myths is not understanding that intercourse is not the only thing. I think couples, when we approach sex, you think, okay, we need to do intercourse. Anything else is like a bonus, but it's not necessary. But if we define sex as only intercourse, then what we're really saying is that sex is an encounter in which he's going to feel great and she probably won't. Right. And like, that's
Right.
not, so if we want to think of our sex life in something that both people are going to enjoy, then you need to think of sex as any sexual activity that we do that is mutual and pleasurable and intimate. And that's how I like to think about it. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Cool. What are some of the relationship factors that get in the way of women being able to reach orgasm? Because I'm sure it's not just physical.
No, absolutely not. One of the things I often laugh about with women is you can be having an amazing time, like just everything's going really well, and you're thinking to yourself, you know, this is good, this is great, you know, this is amazing, and then you think, oh gosh, is there milk in the fridge? Like, oh shoot, we're out of milk. And you were trying to enjoy sex, but then milk came in and you start thinking about milk, and then you start writing a shopping list, and now you're just totally distracted and you're gone and you're not enjoying it anymore, because for most women, our sex drives are almost entirely here. And so if your head's not engaged, your body won't follow. And here's how that relates to relationship. Is that so many women carry the majority of the mental load for the family. So women tend to be the ones who are figuring out the grocery list and figuring out, you know, Johnny has to be at karate tomorrow at 5:15, and Melissa needs to be picked up from gymnastics at 5. And I've got to make sure they both have their homework done, and we've got to figure out dinner. And so she's figuring out all of these things. And also it's Melissa's turn to have snack. Like we have to bring snack to gymnastics tomorrow. And Johnny at karate, he borrowed someone something, and I need to remember to put that in the car to bring it back. And she's got all these details in her head that he doesn't carry in the same way. You know, even if he's really busy at work, it's different because when he comes home, he can turn off and he can just be present. But often she can never turn off because she's always got to remember all of this stuff. And so the more that he can share the mental load in the family, the more space you give her to just relax and get in touch with her sexuality. Because when she has no mental space, there's no mental room in there for libido. And I think that's what a lot of couples don't understand.
That's great. That's a whole nother topic. We could do a deep dive on how to share the mental load better.
Yes.
Better, how to like delegate tasks to each other and just get those off. And I think couples that do relate really well are very efficient and good at sharing the load. Yeah,
absolutely. And I don't think people understand how much of a sex issue that is, because the number one reason that women say they have no libido and that they can't reach orgasm is exhaustion. So if you can take care of the exhaustion part, then you're so much further ahead.
That's great. How does pressure to climax or especially like coming from the husband, affect the
Yeah.
woman's ability to orgasm? I think we need to talk about that too.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because what I've heard a lot of people say is you can't reach orgasm if you're pressuring yourself. And so you've got to let go of the pressure, which to a large extent I completely agree with. But on the other hand, that often makes it sound like, well, if she does, it's great, but if she doesn't, it's not a big deal. And I actually think this is a big deal. I think that we should be aiming, to help her reach climax. I think, so what I would say is that it really depends. If you're in a relationship where she's in the 48% that almost always or always does, or she's in the other 18% that does more than half the time. Okay, so that's almost 2/3 of women. If she's in that group and one night she says, "Hun, I've just got too much on my mind. I'm just not going to tonight, but I'm having fun. Let's just go for it without worrying about me." Guys, take the gift. Okay, like she's trying to give you a gift, take the gift. Because there's sometimes women may start and they may think it's going to go somewhere, and then you realize, no, I can't. And so guys, just take the gift. So if you're in that group where she can reach orgasm quite easily, don't put that pressure on her. If she says not tonight, understand that it's not tonight. On the other hand, if you're in a group where she never has, or she just very rarely has, I think that's a piece of the puzzle we need to figure out. And it is really important to figure that out. You probably should figure it out, maybe not necessarily when you're trying intercourse, but try to bring her to orgasm in other ways or something. But that is something that does need to be figured out, because if you have sex with someone for like 5 years and she never reaches orgasm, that's just not right. Like, we should be doing something about that.
Right. We need to be right. Definitely. Are all women capable of orgasm?
Yes.
If you have a clitoris, you can reach orgasm, right?
Yes. The problem is that usually when women can't reach orgasm, like I had a woman, we just released an orgasm course recently on our blog, and I had a woman saying to me, "This is great, but I just need more tips on what to do physically." And we have like so many, believe me, like we have lots and lots of stuff to do, but she wants even more because it's not working. And the issue is that when women have difficulty, it's very rarely to do with what's happening physically, and it's much more likely to be what's happening up here, or relationally between the two of you. If there's a block, if you have a hard time trusting him, if he's had porn issues, all of those things can also impact it. And so what we're often looking for is a physical fix. Like if he touches her just this way, that'll put her over the edge. And that's what all the magazine covers make it sound like, right? Like learn the 5 spots that will make her go crazy. But while there might be an element of truth to that, you gotta set the stage first. And so like if she's got some mental blocks, if she's got trauma in her past, if she's got beliefs about sex that have been holding her back, any of those things, those need to be dealt with first. And no amount of trying to figure out that special spot is going to work until you've dealt with all those other things.
Gotcha. I can see how like a limiting belief of like, no, sex is dirty, or touching myself is dirty, or like, this isn't right. Like that, and that could come from trauma in the past, or it could be because of just negative upbringing. There's so many factors that would, like your brain can override the physical sensations because of the attitudes and mental beliefs and images you have in your head.
Yeah, and here's two that we wouldn't necessarily think of as being negative, but what we found on our survey of 20,000, these are really dangerous ones. And one is, I am obligated to have sex when my husband wants it. So, and we talk about that a lot, right? Like he has sexual needs, you're his wife, you need to fulfill those needs, do not deprive him, et cetera, et cetera. But when women see sex as an obligation, it kills their sexual response.
Yeah.
Because seeing sex as an obligation means what I am experiencing and feeling doesn't matter. It's only about what you need. So I am not important. And the thing about sex is that it's not just physical. It's supposed to be this real intimate joining. I mean, you talk about this. This is the whole point of your app, right?
Right.
Is that intimately us? It's about it's about being intimate. It's not just about being physical. And as you experience more intimacy, the physical is going to get better. And that's it. Like, it's supposed to be something which is an intimate joining of two people. But when one of you feels like I am not important, then it becomes you're using me. And when we feel used, we can't feel free. It's just a very damaging message. And so getting over that message, instead of saying you're obligated to have sex, saying that sex is a fun and vibrant part of a healthy marriage that you get to enjoy. Like, that's a much better message, right? Than just you're obligated. Another really dangerous one is if you don't have sex, he's going to lust or look at porn. So we have to have sex in order to drug him so that he won't do something bad. And that just kills women's sexual response too. So there's a lot of these beliefs that you can pick up on, and especially in, some of our religious communities or whatever it is, that can really kill our sexual response.
Definitely. All of those things to me sound like, especially when men say sex is a need for me, they want to be caretaked. It means they don't want to be responsible for their own sexuality, and they expect their spouse to do that for them. And I can't think of anything that would kill libido and desire more than that. Like, no one wants to have to caretake someone else's sexuality.
Yes, that's not a turn on. Yeah,
definitely not. So we, as husbands too, I think we need to be careful in saying like sex is a need, because it co-constructs this relationship where you're saying, your job is to service my sexual needs, because I don't have a legitimate outlet anywhere else. And that just kills desire completely. Yeah. Great. Can your own expectations and pressure you put on yourself affect your ability to get there? Like, if you try so hard to get there yourself, does that sometimes self-defeating?
Absolutely. We in our course, we put together 5 different prototypes or characters of women that might have issues with orgasm for different reasons. And one of them we called the it girl. And what we meant by that is there are some women who their identity is based in being the one who has it all together and being the one that everybody looks up to. She's always doing the right thing. She's really proper, and she's just got everything together. And so what happens when you go into sex then is, instead of allowing yourself just to experience it, you tend to spend it judging yourself. Am I doing this right? How do I look when I do this? Am I saying the right thing? Am I moving right? And it becomes, you're giving yourself judgment messages constantly. And when you give yourself judgment messages, and we can do that for all kinds of other reasons too. This is just one of my 5 characters. All of them do it for different reasons. But when you give yourself these judgment messages, then you're not able to just live in the moment and experience. And what sex is really this ability to become vulnerable, to let go, and to let it carry you along. And the only way to do that is to get out of your head and let yourself inhabit your body. So we have to, and that means being vulnerable, not worrying about what you look like, not worrying about whether you're doing it right, but really learning to listen to your body. And that's something that a lot of women struggle with.
Gotcha. Self-love, self-care, I guess.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, let's talk to women that struggle to reach orgasm, and they want to get there. What are some steps they can take on their own to get more comfortable with their body and to get out of their head into their body better?
Practicing mindfulness is really helpful, I think. And even just from what I just said, don't give yourself those judgment messages. Mindfulness is just learning to live in the moment without judging the moment. It's just looking at what's going on and experiencing the moment. And there's so many great YouTube channels, books you can buy, all kinds of stuff on mindfulness. It's not some weird Eastern thing. It honestly isn't. It's just it's just a really good health practice, actually. And learning how to be present. So that's a really good one. I think anything like yoga, stretching, Pilates, where you get used to your body and feeling your body, because a lot of us don't want to feel anything from the neck down. It's funny. Men often struggle with identifying emotions. because men aren't taught how to handle emotions as well as women are. And so men often have difficulty identifying what they're feeling emotionally. Women often have difficulty identifying what they're feeling physically, because we have such body image issues. And so as women, if we can learn how to get more in touch with our bodies, that can really help. Then when we move it into the sexual realm, I think one of the best things that we can do is learn. You can't get to orgasm without going through arousal and excitement. And a lot of us try to get right to orgasm without ever understanding what arousal and excitement feel like. So we need to take some huge steps back. And one of the things we talk about in our orgasm course is don't aim for orgasm until you've figured these things out. And there's all kinds of different ways that you can do that. But even as couples, like, go back to making out. It's so funny. We tell teenagers, don't make out, right? Like, don't ever lie down together. Don't kiss past a certain number of seconds or whatever, or else you're going to have sex. And so you've got to have all these boundaries to protect yourself from having sex. But why is it that kissing and hugging and leads to sex? Well, it's because usually, you've spent hours kissing and your hands have been wandering and it's just been fun. You haven't thought it's going anywhere. So you've just been experiencing it. And then you get more and more aroused. And then your body is saying, let's do the next thing. And so your body wants to do the next thing. And this is, of course, is all what we're scared that teenagers will do. But then when we're married, we forget about all of that. And instead of waiting for our bodies to tell us, let's do the next thing, we jump to the final thing. And our bodies have never said, let's do the next thing. That's why I really like your app. Some of the games that you play, like a lot of the foreplay games, like, do this for just a couple of minutes, do this for just, like, you're not jumping in to go for the clitoris. Like, you're not doing that. Because actually, if you go for the clitoris when she's not aroused at all, that can be a huge turnoff, like, we're trying to get things moving here by not going to the nth degree, but scaling it way back. Because a lot of women have honestly never even reached arousal. And when you haven't reached arousal, you're not going to reach orgasm.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts on, like, exploring on your own what feels good?
I think women should just do what they're comfortable with. I think that if you're comfortable with that, that's great. I think a lot of women, that can be an issue for them. And so then what I often say is, if you just can't do it, take his hand. So, like, touch yourself, but use his hand to do it. Because then, hey, he'll learn what you like. And you'll learn, what feels good as well. But, I just remember that for most people, for most couples, women reach orgasm in ways other than intercourse. And so you have to spend time on those other ways, whether it's touching or oral sex or whatever it might be. You need to spend time on those things. And so figure that piece out. Now, what we have seen in studies is that women's ability to reach orgasm through masturbation is not necessarily related to her ability to reach orgasm through intercourse with her husband. So I don't want to shame women into feeling like, well, if I can't touch myself, I'll never be able to reach orgasm. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. But if you are comfortable, I think it can be a good way of just understanding what arousal is supposed to feel like, because you get the biofeedback.
Right.
Your body is telling you right away. Yeah.
And I like what you said. It depends on, like, the meaning associated with it too. Like, it could be a great gift to your marriage by taking some time to, learn what feels good, if you approach it in the right way.
Yeah.
The spirit of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you touched on this, so let's do a deep dive on, besides, intercourse, penis and vagina intercourse, what are like 5 other ways couples can engage sexually to help her reach orgasm?
I think going back to the beginning, and just making out again is really important. Watch a romantic movie, make out during the movie, make out after the movie, just go back to kissing and touching and let your hands wander and act like you're 17 or 18 again. And that's really important. And then I think everything else is just kind of on a continuum. I think those other things are all part of a healthy sex life. So, learning how to touch her, and that doesn't mean going right for the clitoris, okay? Like most women, stroke the inside of her arms, stroke the backs of her knees, stroke her inner thighs. Like most women feel good just being touched. Give her a really long back massage. That can be part of foreplay. And hey, do it naked, and it's got some neat associations there too. And then once she is aroused some, okay, then you can start going for the more erogenous zones. But it's really important that people don't jump to those erogenous zones before she's ready for it. And so she needs to learn to just let her body feel without trying to rush ahead. And he needs to learn to take her cues and to really study her cues so that he understands, okay, this does mean that she's getting more excited.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So wait for that progression.
Yes.
Right?
And, and all of those things are part of it. Like oral sex, touching her, whatever it might be. Like, there's no reason you can't do them all in one encounter. I mean, you can also do just one, whatever, but like, it's all part of just having fun. So, yeah.
That's great. And that's important to keep that playful side of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Why do people say oral sex is so effective in this area?
Oh gosh, I don't even know. I know that women love it. I know that it tends to be far more effective than anything else. There's certain things guys can do that really wreck it. Like, one of the things guys really need to understand is, between the clitoris and the vagina, you have the urethra. So the opening that urine comes out of. That is not sexy. Like, nothing feels good there. Okay. So you just, whether you're touching, no matter what you're doing, like, do not pay attention to that part of her. So really concentrate, mostly on the clitoris. But I think probably it's also that, oral sex is a lot gentler than touch. And so it tends to be more the level of touch that she would like to.
Oh, that's great. Okay, let's say there's a situation where she just takes a really long time to get there.
Yeah.
And any tips to help the husband stay engaged? Like, if it's taken an hour or more?
One of the worst things guys can do is communicate, you are taking too long, I'm getting bored, we need to move on to the next thing. That is guaranteed to kill her desire, and it probably might be one of the reasons why she is taking so long. Like, if a woman can reach orgasm, so she does know what it feels like, she kind of knows how to ride the wave, she knows what leads up to it, then if she's taking like an hour or so, it could be because she is experiencing a lot of guilt for taking too long. She's putting a lot of pressure on herself. And the best thing that he can do is to communicate, I could do this all night and it wouldn't bother me. Because if you can find a way to communicate that, then it's actually going to help her speed up. Because probably one of the reasons that she is taking too long or so long is that she feels like he's getting bored. He doesn't want to do this. It's not going to happen. And so the more that you can give her the chance to just relax, it doesn't matter. No matter how, we're having fun. The point is that we're having fun. And I can keep doing this. That can really help. Also, I think just not doing the same thing. So, there is a point. If you look at the arousal cycle, the sexual response cycle, there is a point where she's getting close to orgasm and she's plateaued that you need to do exactly the same thing. Okay. Like, do not stop, do not vary it, do not get faster, do not get slower, do not move, like, just keep doing this exact same thing. And that's how you get her over the edge. But until you're at that point, doing different things can help. So that's why I think your app is so great too, because you can do one thing for 2 minutes, then you can do something else for a few minutes, then you can do something else for a few minutes. And that adds variety. It brings down the tension level, because if all you're doing is like flicking her clitoris for like 45 minutes, she's just going to feel like a failure, right? But if you're doing different things, if you're trying different positions, if you're doing this for a couple of minutes, then it's not so much like you're watching the clock. And that's a really important dynamic that she needs to get away from.
Okay, gotcha. What else should husbands not do?
It's very important, guys, that you understand that she was created to orgasm first. Okay, ladies first, because after orgasm, he has a refractory period where he can't get aroused again. He can't get erect again. He can't keep having sex. She doesn't have that. So she can keep going. She can have multiple orgasms. So she was designed to keep having sex after climax. He was not. But the other thing that happens is that during climax, you release all of these wonderful hormones, and you feel great. But the result of those hormones is that you tend to get really calm and really relaxed and really sleepy. And so if you're going into sex thinking, well, we'll see if she has an orgasm, and if she doesn't, then I'll bring her to orgasm after, then when you try to do it afterwards, it's going to be half-hearted, even if you don't mean it to be, because it's just hard to stay excited about something when everything in your body is saying, I feel amazing, I want to go to sleep now. So it is really important to make her the main event at first. And then once she's good, then you can go. And I think that's the way that our bodies were designed. And then I think the other thing that I would say is just understand that the way that she needs to be touched and the way that she feels good is going to be different from you. And that's okay. Like, if I can say something really crass, if you make the hand, and I'm not asking you to do this, but if you make the hand motion that would most commonly be used to bring him to climax manually, and then you make the hand motion that would most commonly be used to bring her to climax manually, they're very different. And one of them resembles intercourse a lot more than the other. So, like, just because she doesn't get really excited during intercourse, although she can, and that's a big part of our course as well, is how to help her enjoy intercourse too. But just because that's not as exciting for her as it is for you does not mean that she's rejecting you. It doesn't mean that she's not sexual. It doesn't mean that she's broken. And I think often we think of male sexuality as being the norm, and then female sexuality is broken, and she just needs to fix herself so that now she meets and matches him. So she needs to like intercourse the way that he likes intercourse. Her libido needs to be spontaneous the way that his is spontaneous. And that's not helpful, because she's not broken. She's just different.
Gotcha. Yeah, so much of our society references the male sexual response as the norm, and female is relative to that. And that's probably hurt a lot of marriages too, because of that referencing relative to male. In fact, in many ways, females have a superior sexual response, because in general, I think women have a better ability to have prolonged, deeper orgasms. They don't have that refractory period problem that men have, so they can enjoy multiple orgasms. Any tips or advice for women that want to, they can have an orgasm now and then more regularly, now they're ready for multiple orgasms, or how can they increase their capacity, their sexual capacity?
I think the best thing to do is just to learn to keep breathing. That's the big thing, is during orgasm, keep breathing, because we can stop it. Like, we can stop it ourselves by, it's so hard to explain, but by feeling like it's done. But if you just keep breathing and keep riding it, it really can keep lasting. And that's just something that comes with experience, I think, and with just trying different things. But don't hold your breath and rush it. Like, once you feel it coming on, just keep breathing, and in fact, breathe deeper, and you might find that it just keeps going.
Okay, great. Let's switch gears a bit. And let's say you and your spouse are actually in a really good place in your marriage, and you're getting all the basics down. You're having, very satisfying and pleasurable and connecting sex often. what are your black belt sex techniques or sex tips you can offer a spouse that wants to take their sex to the next level?
I think it's, I don't know if this is about taking sex to the next level as much as it is making sure things don't get boring. But I really recommend that couples take, I don't know if I would say once a week or however often it works for you, where you go to bed before you're tired. That's a really big thing, is going to bed before you're tired. So let's say you have to be up at 6:30 in the morning. Then that means if you're going to get 8 hours of sleep, which most of us do need, you might think you don't need it, but you really do. That means you should be getting to sleep at 10:30, which means that if you want to do anything at all, even if it's just talk, you need to be heading to bed at 10 at least. And if you want to have a good sexual encounter, it really means heading to bed at like a quarter to 10. But if you want to really have like a long drawn out one where you have some fun and you talk, like, let's try a 9:15 instead, and at least once a week or a couple of times a month, turn off Netflix. Like after the kids go to bed, you head to bed too. And I think if you want to accomplish more in your sex life, if you want to reach the multiple orgasms, if you wanted to, you need to start much earlier in the night. And it's such a little thing, I know, but it's very difficult because one of the biggest drawbacks is you start sex when you're already really sleepy. and then, yeah, it might feel good, but it's not going to be stupendous. And if you don't have children, then try heading to the bedroom during the day sometimes, where, yeah, it's like being sleepy isn't a factor whatsoever. And I think that can really help. I think using things like your apps where you're trying a bunch of different positions. Often women will get, will find one position or maybe two positions where they can orgasm in. It's very rare that you'll find a woman who can orgasm in like multiple different ones. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with her. Doesn't mean that's not something to aim for. But if it doesn't happen, it's not a big deal. Okay. I think sometimes we try to say, like, we try to make everything be amazing. And it isn't necessarily going to be. But let's say that you have your typical woman on top position is the best one for her. Then it could be that's the position you always end in, but maybe you're going to start to begin in some other ones. Or you take the position that you always end in, but you can try different things with it. Move her legs so they're instead of being on her knees, she's putting more weight, she's extending them, or she can shift forward or backward or whatever, but take the positions that you like and just try different things with them every now and then so that it's not always the same thing. And I think that's a big part. And then another big part, I think, is just doing a really long lead up, whether it's a bath together, whether it's that back massage. It doesn't need to be super sexy, but the more the big lead up you have, the more sex is going to be intense when you do have it.
That's great. All right. Tell us about your orgasm course.
Yeah, well, it's 5 modules, and where the purpose is to help you figure out arousal and help you figure out what's holding you back, and then help you open the floodgates. And so we deal with a lot of the mental blocks. We explain what orgasm is. We help women work through what are my turn-ons, and then we just work you through like little step by step, little bit by little bit, all the physical things that you can do to figure this out. And in the final module, we have how to reach orgasm during intercourse, because I know that's what a lot of people want. We also have an add-on for husbands that husbands can take to help their wives and figure out her missing pieces as well. Because this really is a couple issue. Like she can't work on this totally by herself. She needs his help as well. And my daughter, Rebecca, who worked on it with me, she looked at all the scientific studies she could find about orgasm, so that it really wasn't a course about how we reach orgasm, because that's just creepy, but it is a course where we're looking at what science says. We also used all the data from our survey of 20,000 women. And so this is really scientifically based. It's very accurate, and it just takes you step by step through. And we're hoping that it's going to help a lot of women have breakthroughs, because I really do want to close that orgasm gap.
That's great. I do too. Any closing words of hope or encouragement to those that, after listening to this podcast or watching this video, who struggle with this, any encouragement that you'd give them?
Yeah, well, like I opened this whole thing up with, sex was the worst part of our marriage for several years. It really, truly was. And it's not now. And that 48% that of women who say that they always reach orgasm or almost always reach orgasm, if you had asked a lot of them 5 years ago, they may not have been in that group. Because most people who are currently in the 48% at some point in the past would have put themselves in another group. Because most women do not reach orgasm right off the bat in marriage consistently all the time. For most people, there's a learning curve. And so if you're not in that 48% right now, that doesn't mean you're not going to be there one day. And it also doesn't mean that it needs to take you as long as it perhaps took some of them. Because the good news is, if you actually start paying attention to this stuff, and especially early in your marriage, then it can be this super fun research project that you do. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you don't work properly. It just means, hey, this is a way we're going to grow in intimacy, and this is going to be fun. And if you can figure this out earlier, then then it doesn't need to take several years or several decades. You know, if we pay attention to it, you actually can have a breakthrough relatively soon.
That's great. Thank you, Sheila. We'll catch you again another time.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right.